We are back live once again, bringing you another Johnny Torch live broadcast. Welcome in, one and all, as we bring to you today Torch News Roundup number. I didn't put it in the description. Oh well. I'm gonna try to say it's probably Torch News Roundup 110. Is that what it is? It's not written down here. I'll put it in the description after the video, but no matter how hard I try to prepare for everything, I'm only one man. But that adds to the charm. Here we are, high in stately Torch Tower, looking down below at the fair metropolis, the hustle and the bustle, the scurrying about of people in the city. But here we are, bringing to you another Johnny Torch Live. We are going to talk about a trio of trailers today. Probably not a long broadcast, unless I get long-winded, as I want to do. Before we get into that, however, let us take a look at our poll of the week question. I told you about this on Wednesday. And the poll is still up with one more day left to go. If you are so inclined to check it out, look in the description below for the link to my Twitter page. And you will find the question being, if Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie ends up being pretty good, would you be against him replacing the Jared Leto version going forward in the DCEU? With a whopping 214 votes, which is, I'm pretty sure, obliterating my record for the most votes in a poll of the week question I've ever done. Replace with Joaquin Phoenix wins with 69% of the vote. Keep Jared Leto has 31% of the vote. Again, you can still vote if you are listening to this within the 24-hour period after I recorded it. But it looks like, I think it's safe to say, most fans out there would probably replace Jared Leto with Joaquin Phoenix if given the opportunity. Okay, as we carry on, let me also remind you to check out the link in the description below for my comic, The Adventures of Bullets Bourbon, Private Eye. You can find a two-page preview, a free preview of the story that we currently are on now, issue number 4, Street of Dreams, and it is a humdinger, razzmatazz. We got two villains, Bullets Bourbon's two main villains, teaming up against him, which is tantamount to the most destructive force mankind has ever known. Their plans are not only to terrorize Stark City this time, but the whole nation. And by terrorizing the whole nation, of course, they are going to terrorize the entire world. That is, of course, if Bullets Bourbon doesn't stop them. Find out if he does in issue 4, Street of Dreams. It is, of course, the first of a 3-part story arc that we are working on now. I am still working very busily on the second issue of the arc. The story arc is called When the Night Comes, Night with a K. And I'm hoping to get it out by the end of the year, maybe the beginning of next year at the very latest. Of course, it depends on how much more work I put on myself. As I said, I would like to try to get some more videos out. My output of videos is not quite as prolific as it once was because I am trying very hard to get this issue out because it is a year overdue. Also, much credit and respect for those of you who smash that like button, deign to subscribe to this lowly channel. We are trying to get 100 YouTube subscriptions here by the end of the year. We're up to 75. It's taken me about 3 years to get to 75, so I don't know how long it's going to take to get me to 100, but if you are so inclined, hit that subscribe button. Okay, here we go. We are officially starting the show, and there's been a slew of trailers out. Last week, we took care of the Creed 2 second trailer, which was phenomenal, by the way. If you haven't seen last week's edition, check it out as soon as possible. I'm sure I'll put a card at the end of the video. Let's see. We are going to start with the Holmes and Watson trailer. This, I just saw this. I frankly am not a big fan of parodies of things like Holmes and Watson. I know this isn't the first film to try to satirize the relationship between Holmes and Watson. Sometimes it's Holmes was really an idiot and it's Watson that's the brains behind the pair. Sometimes, they're both blithering idiots, which it seems to be in this case. But I admit, when I seen the trailer, I did laugh out loud a couple of times. Probably 3 times. So it does look very funny. I probably will still wait to see this one on Netflix or cable or something, but I could be persuaded to see this one. This one does look pretty funny. Of course, we've got John C. Reilly as the Dr. Watson on the left, and we've got Will Ferrell Will Ferrell as the master detective. Okay. I'm glad that I got that all out. Yeah, not a whole lot to say here. There's a couple of funny things. They're apparently not going to try to stay, completely in the time frame of the film. There's a lot of jokes that are more modern day, like Watson trying to take a selfie with a vintage 19th century camera, which was pretty funny, I thought. Um, Braun Strowman has a cameo here as a, I don't know, bar fighter or something in a bare knuckles boxer or something, which is I was surprised to see. That's a nice step up for Braun to get a major motion picture role. That's going to up his status. Um, John C. Reilly is really cool. I like him, and Will Ferrell is all right too. I mean, I really haven't seen too many things with them. I don't see a lot of movies. I don't see a lot of comedies. I remember John C. Reilly mostly from Guardians of the Galaxy, and he was great there. I really thought he was funny. What was his name? Denarian Day, and uh, the Ralph Fiennes, I think, or Ralph Fiennes. How do you pronounce that? Yeah, I think he is playing Moriarty. So yeah, they're sticking to Moriarty. Now, this is a subject that I would like to broach probably in another video where we can really talk, really get to the meat and potatoes of this subject. But this kind of, and if you can hear behind me, of course, this is the perils of living in a metropolis where you can hear the car alarms going off, I'm sure. But apologies for that. But I would like, there it is, it's done. Okay. I would like to do a real discussion on the perils of copyright and public domain. Because Sherlock Holmes is sort of the poster child for what happens when you have a popular character go into the public domain. I am a strong proponent of keeping creators' rights. Obviously, they're with the creator for the entire duration of their life, but I believe they should stay with the family. I think Dame Jean Doyle, was that her name? She was the daughter of Sir Arthur Conan, and she pretty much was the last say on Doyle's works for a long time. I believe she passed on for a good. It's been a good 10 years. And the thing is, with public domain, there's no guiding hand to what can and can't be done with these characters, which is why you've seen probably 50 million Sherlock Holmes versions. Some good, some bad, some terrible. But what do you think about this? Do you think that we really need characters and storylines to go into the public domain and have them be, well, I don't want to say ridiculed. I mean, this is obviously a parody. A parody is even protected under copyright law. So this is not, I'm not broaching the subject basically to say, well, they're doing a terrible thing to Sherlock Holmes and public domain stinks and this is why. Because parody will still happen either way. And I'm a fan of parody. Of course, Weird Al was one of my childhood heroes and still is, of course. But I don't know if I don't know if it benefits. I mean, like, 'cause a lot of people want to say Superman should be up for public domain pretty soon. Batman probably not long after. And wouldn't that be great because we could have a plethora of, you know, talented artists that would love to do something with the characters that are not allowed to now per copyright law. Because, corporations, of course, have a big hand in what's going on. Again, it's a subject I like to really get into, but like I said, I feel that when you have something going into the public domain, you do run afoul of the problem of overexposure and the character really being put in the public face, regardless if it's good, bad, or indifferent. And I don't know. I mean, you could say that about. for instance, Superman. I mean, he hasn't had a good movie, honestly, in a good 20 years. Would having Superman be in the public domain actually help the situation? Would we see something exceptional in a public domain Superman movie? You have to also remember, though, that with public domain comes very, defined parameters. You won't get a lot of the trappings. I think you'll get Lois Lane, but probably nothing else. You won't get the Daily Planet. You won't get Perry White. You won't get Jimmy Olsen. You won't get Lex Luthor. You'll get uh, probably just Superman, Lois Lane, and Krypton. I believe the name Krypton was also in the earliest incarnations of the Siegel and Schuster comic. So again, you have to work with a very fine parameter in a lot of cases as well. It's not just simply you get the full reign of 80 years worth of material. So that's another thing you have to consider. Is that really helpful if you're going to try to do something with a public domain character? But it's an interesting subject. So let me know what you think about the subject of public domain. Let me know what you think about the subject of Sherlock Holmes. And what do you think about the Holmes and Watson trailer? Is this something you're interested in? Is it just sort of a funny, just a funny little time waster, maybe? Because one of the problems I have with public domain is when you see just how many different kinds of Sherlock Holmes, you know, uh, different kinds of versions that there have been incarnations, I guess is the word I was trying to find. But all the while, I mean, we've had Sherlock Holmes in the 22nd century. I remember that from when I was a kid, a teenager, which had Watson as a robot. Holmes, I think, waking up in the future. We've had, we've had the modern day Sherlock Holmes many times. They've done that with, they have that with Benedict Cumberbatch and Jude Law. We have Watson as a woman, an Asian woman on the CBS version. I mean, do we really need all these different versions? Or should we get a faithful representation, sort of the way what I define as the gold standard of Sherlock Holmes, which is the Jeremy Brett series, the Granada series? That to me, there's that and there's everything else. Of course, the before that there was the Basil Rathbone version, which of course was also exceptional. He defined Sherlock Holmes for many a generation, for like two generations, I think. But still, he they didn't really stick to the letter of the Conan Doyle stories. The movies had nothing to do with the original Conan Doyle stories. The radio shows did for the most part, but they also had to come up with new stories. But they stuck more to the period. I think the Rathbone Nigel Bruce films took place in then present day. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Holmes and Watson, public domain, the whole shebang. What is your take on it? Let me know in the comments below. All right, John C. Reilly isn't finished with us yet today. This is a film I'm really looking forward to. Again, I don't know if it's going to hit the spot though, but John C. Reilly is going to play Oliver Norval Hardy, along with Steve Coogan as Arthur Stanley Jefferson, aka Stanley Laurel. In the Laurel and Hardy movie, the trailer came out a couple of weeks ago. I was waiting for an episode like this where I don't have a whole lot to talk about. We've only got a couple of subjects, but we could fit this one in here. I think they look fantastic. And the makeup is perfect on John C. Reilly. I mean, they've got Hardy's, double chin in the makeup there. Perfect. This, of course, is taken the scene from the dance scene from Way Out West on the Trail of the Lonesome Pine. Of course, I am a classic comedy connoisseur, big fan of Laurel and Hardy and all the classics, Three Stooges, Abbott and Costello, you name it. But Laurel and Hardy hasn't had their story told. That is something that makes this very interesting. I'm going to say, though, when you do a biopic on, you know, any subject, you're going to have a problem with selective focus. What are they going to focus on? Now, from the trailer, what we see in the trailer is Laurel and Hardy having an argument because Hardy did a film without Laurel, which did happen in real life. I think it was Zorobia, or something like that. I know he did a film where he was, I think, a veterinarian, and he was taking care of, I don't know, it was an elephant or something. I only seen it once. Frankly, wasn't all that interesting. Just like the silent films of Laurel and Hardy when they were separate, when they were apart from each other. Not seeing them play Stan and Ollie was never really all that interesting to me, and so subsequently, the separation of the two was not popular. But they're having an argument in this trailer, in this segment where Laurel is feels deeply betrayed because Hardy took this role starring in a film without him. Hardy, of course, also I think he did a minor role in a John Wayne movie. I can't remember which one it is right now. So Hardy did sort of kick around Hollywood and do, a few things. Stan was always more of the creative side of the team. As anyone would tell you that knows anything about Stan and Ollie, Stan was the primary writer, the gag man that came up with the comedy and stuff. Hardy, of course, was supremely talented, but did not take part in any of the writing. He would be content to very professionally do his part, play the scenes, do the routines, and then go off and golf and enjoy the rest of his day. They kind of, I think, are taking that and trying to, well, for lack of a better term, make a mountain out of a molehill, because you need to have some kind of drama in a biopic. See, the thing is with Laurel and Hardy, they were always together. There really wasn't any grand conflict between them. If you look at the partnership of Abbott and Costello by comparison, they fought like cats and dogs. There was a certain point in the early to mid 40s, I believe, where they didn't speak for over a year. For like a year and a half, they didn't speak because they had a more contentious relationship. Again, it's all speculative, I suppose, at this point on whose fault is for it, but they were competitive with each other. Costello had a bit of an ego, things like that. That didn't really happen with Laurel and Hardy, and it feels like they're sort of manufacturing some kind of drama just for the sake of it, which is kind of something I'm wary of. That's like they did a Three Stooges made for TV movie. I think it's the one that Mel Gibson produced. And they had it where Mo Howard was delivering sandwiches to the producers, the head of the studio, at 67 years old. And that really didn't happen. They just had to add some kind of drama to it where there really was no drama in the Three Stooges careers. I mean, there was never no controversies of them not getting along. There was a lot of drama in different areas, such as Ted Healy, the original the original leader of the Stooges. Was Ted Healy and the Stooges. He was a bad alcoholic by all accounts, and when they left him, sort of like a bad divorce, he would always come and threaten them. This led to the reason why Shemp, who was actually one of the original members of the act, he left the act because he couldn't deal with Ted Healy any longer, and Shemp ended up, doing well for himself in shorts outside of the Three Stooges until, of course, Jerome Howard, aka Curly, who took ill with a stroke and subsequently lived quite a while after that. But Shemp stood in, took his place as the third Stooge, and of course Shemp was always good. I always liked Shemp. I think most Stooge fans like Shemp. I mean, everybody loves Curly the best, but Shemp was a good, more than fitting replacement for Curly. And then we got the Joes, who were not great, but I don't have anything against Joe Besser, really. I thought he was great in the Abbott and Costello show. I think his dynamic with the Stooges, though, was a little off. It was, because he played sort of the prissy little kid, and here he was, with two middle-aged, almost senior citizen Stooges. I think at that point maybe Mo was a legitimate senior citizen, and he kind of couldn't pull off that prissy little kid routine with them. again, we're getting off the beaten path, but I love classic comedy. Love to talk about it. So if anybody out there enjoys their classic comedy, make sure you check me out on Twitter and tell me about it in the link in the description below for my Twitter page, and also in the comments below. I got another image here that might show a little bit better the makeup before we wrap on this. You can see this. This film sort of takes place, I think, during the England tour that the boys did. Just probably at the close. I think it was the close of their work with Roach. They worked with Roach for several years during the 20s and 30s and became very popular under Hal Roach Studios, and then they moved to MGM and Fox uh, for a few films, and mostly with Fox for the last few years. They never really quite recaptured the spark, and it's disappointing because I don't think Stan was given the free reign that he really needed to work on those films. But they sort of try to put them in a mold, more Abbott and Costello-esque mold, where there was that was what the good thing was about Laurel and Hardy was, unlike Abbott and Costello, they fronted their own films. I mean, Abbott and Costello would have, romantic leads, and there was like a comedy, a side character or something. But in the case of Laurel and Hardy, they fronted the whole thing. There was never no, even the Marx Brothers sort of fell afoul to that, where everybody used to say in the old days, when the romantic leads come on in a Marx Brothers movie, it's time to get up and get popcorn, because it was just like a lengthy wait until you've seen the Marx Brothers back, and it was similar. That was what they did in those days. But Laurel and Hardy were spared of that up until the 40s and until the Fox years. Also, they have showing the decline of Oliver Hardy's health, which of course is sad because he did balloon up in weight, really grand weight gain at the end of his life that he did take off eventually, but that led to the decline of his health, which is what is portrayed in the trailer. We also see Laurel's wife, which Laurel I think was married 4 times, I believe. I think this was his third wife, and there was sort of a contentious relationship, by all accounts, that she was sort of difficult to get along with, sort of the Yoko Ono of the Laurel and Hardy team, unfortunately. Again, this is what they say. But yeah, the performances are great. I swear they couldn't have gotten better actors for this. Steve Coogan, he speaks like Stan Laurel, which is a very distinctive voice, Stan Laurel, and he looks just like him. And same thing with John C. Reilly with the voice. He's doing the Oliver Hardy sort of Southern drawl that he had just fantastically, and the makeup looks great too. So again, this one looks interesting, and I may have to check this one out when the time comes. Alrighty. Next up, we have, this is the one you've all been waiting for. We're getting back into the superhero genre we all know and love. The Dark Phoenix finally got their trailer out. Yes, finally, the Dark Phoenix trailer. I'm sort of conflicted on this trailer, and we're going to get into it. And as usual, I picked, a good dozen photos to try to represent it. Before we get to that, though, I do want to, an attached story, which in the trailer, at the close of the trailer, it says that the Dark Phoenix is scheduled for release February 14th. But news has come to surface here that Fox has shifted all of their films in their slate, basically, for next year, and we are going to see how that affects them. It doesn't say anything about New Mutants that I'm aware of, but let's see. This is the first time I have to refer to my notes. I'm doing this all note-free. All right, it says that Alita has shifted to the February 14th slot of next year that Dark Phoenix was supposed to inhabit. I believe, I'm not sure about this. I think that's the movie with the CGI the character with the CGI eyes or something. That's a very weird movie that they've been promoting. I don't know. Dark Phoenix is now set to be released June 7th of 2019, which that might not be a bad slot for it, I suppose. I don't know when Avengers is Avengers 4 in the summer? I don't remember. But either way you look at it, it is still on the plate for next year. They also released information about the Gambit movie. What? Say what? Gambit is still being that's still a thing? I don't understand this because honestly, I think they should scrap Gambit. I I mean, everybody I think will agree nobody's interested in a Gambit movie. But the problem is that since Disney owns these things, I mean, Dark Phoenix was already completed for the most part. You got all that footage, you got it 90% in the can, you just came back for reshoots and stuff. Put it out. That's a nice finish and cap on the Fox X-Men series, not trilogy. This is the fourth movie in the reboot trilogy, so to speak. But when it comes to Gambit, just pull the plug on any future X films, send it over to Disney, and let them handle it, which is what I think they're supposed to do. But anyway, Gambit is supposedly moved to March 13th of 2020, and that movie is still supposedly in the works. I'm not sure if Channing Tatum is still attached. I think he is, from what I know. Fox has also officially announced that Deadpool will be coming to theaters on December 21st. Now, this is strange because, A, that is, I believe, the date that Aquaman comes out, or it's around that time. So they're going to be competing with Aquaman. They're going to be competing with Mary Poppins Returns. They're going to be competing with, I think there's another movie out. I can't remember right now. But this movie, I think, is supposed to be Deadpool 2, but rated PG-13. Now, I'm all for this because, as I said, I don't like rated R superhero and comic book properties. That to me, you're excluding a large portion of the fan base. The kids, of course, and people like me that don't like the raunchy humor, the nudity, the graphic violence. So if they're willing to tone all that down, I'm happy to see Deadpool 2. I seen some of Deadpool 1. I saw the end of it like the last half hour. I try to watch from the beginning. Like I said, I don't go for that kind of humor and stuff, which is perfectly fine. But anyway, that's where it's at. So we've got Dark Phoenix now scheduled for June 7th, 2019. We have Gambit moved to March 13th, 2020, and Deadpool 2 PG-13 version for December 21st of this year. Let me know what you think about that in the comments below. And all right, for the Dark Phoenix trailer, this is, again, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this all in the order of these scenes that they came out, but it does feel very deja vu-ish to The Last Stand, and a lot of people have mentioned this online. Simon Kinberg, I believe, who wrote Last Stand or co-wrote Last Stand, is also co-wrote this movie. I believe he's the director of this film as well. And we go back to young Jean, who can't control her powers. Charles does something to shield her from her powers against her memory or judgment. She ends up emerging from that, being vengeful as a grown woman. She ends up going rogue and breaking away, returning to her past. The X-Men try to go after her. Magneto shows up and stands in their way. Jean becomes more unstable. The army tries to come in, and she ends up decimating them. Now, did I just describe the Dark Phoenix trailer, or did I just describe The Last Stand? I think you see my point. I don't dislike the trailer or what they're doing here, but they should have put this in space. They should have differentiated it visually more. I think the thing about the Dark Phoenix is it's one of the best, not only one of the best X-Men sagas, but it's one of the best comic sagas. Chris Claremont really created a masterpiece here with this story. And it still really isn't being accurately presented. All right, first let's take a look at young Jean. Of course, we just seen Charles was telling her that she's not broken. She apparently in this scene, it looks like she's responsible for the death of her parents, which of course goes against the comics where they had a prominent part in the Dark Phoenix saga. Uh, it's kind of strange to me. This seems like what I really think this is. I think this is deleted concepts from the Last Stand that they couldn't get to and couldn't fit in. Because if you remember in the Last Stand, Jean goes back to her parents' home, but her parents aren't there, and it makes you wonder, well, where are they? Did she kill them when she was a kid? I don't know. You don't know. We're never really told. Okay, let's see. All right. All right. Jean is back in that famous laboratory there where she's being monitored and checked out. And again, it looks like they're putting the burden on Professor X that he did something to her to keep her from remembering what she did. And apparently from that, the inference is that she did kill her parents. I don't know. Okay. Let's see. We've got I mashed these two images up. This is not the same scene, but of course we got Peter back as Quicksilver. He's fun to see, and Jennifer Lawrence has returned as Mystique. Now this is problematic, and it's kind of ironic that I put both these images together because Quicksilver has been problematic in the past because they don't know what to do with him because he's so overpowered. I don't believe Quicksilver was really in the X-Men all that long in the comics. I mean, I think he and Scarlet Witch sort of had this, tenuous relationship with the X-Men because they were the children of Magneto. But he was more known as an Avenger, I think. And so to continue to, I mean, if they were going to write anybody out, it would probably be easier to write him out. But I don't know what they're going to do with him. That's not going to be, I don't really want them to write him out. I mean, because I do like the character and the actor, but I don't really know where he fits into this story. I would have probably preferred to see Colossus, but they gave Colossus to Deadpool. I don't know why, because Colossus is more a main member of the X-Men. Now, the other part is, of course, we've got Mystique in the X-Men, and again, she's always been more of an antagonist, and they're sort of trying to force her as a X-Man, X-woman. Uh, I love the fact that she's wearing the X-Men uniform. I love the X-Men uniforms. They look they look honestly inexpensive, but I like that we're going with something more colorful than the Bryan Singer versions. And a lot of people are saying, well, why didn't they use the ones from the end of Apocalypse? To be honest with you, they didn't look that great. I didn't like them that much. I like these much better. They look a lot more uniform, which is supposedly what Bryan Singer wanted in the original trilogy, is to have them look uniform so that we didn't have them look like a bunch of separated heroes. They all look like they wore the same thing as a team. So I like that. But it's unforgivable that 90% of this trailer has Mystique with human features. This is supposed to be the whole thing that they boasted in the 60s and the mutant and proud. You know, Raven is mutant and proud. And Magneto taught her lessons. She should never be ashamed of what she looks like. She should be who she is. And they, of course, the problem is that Jennifer Lawrence don't want to wear the full blue costume with the blue makeup and the blue scales, even if they made it more convenient for her, which I think she doesn't have to have her body spray painted and have appliances glued to her anymore, the way she did in the first film and the way Rebecca Romaine did. I think they give her a body stocking, which it probably is just as effective. but she still is unwilling to continually spray paint her face and everything. And I think they try to give an in-world excuse in the last film, in Apocalypse, where she is sort of the face of the mutant revolution when she saved Nixon or whatever, that somehow she's a media celebrity or something and is not going to be left alone. So she has to take on a human appearance. I don't know. It just looks like Jennifer Lawrence don't want to put the makeup on. And again, I like Jennifer Lawrence. I love the way she looks, but I don't know, if story wise, the way they set it up, it makes any sense. Let's stay with Jennifer Lawrence for a minute here. We might as well talk about this at the same time. Let's take a look at her makeup here. Again, the eyes look like they digitally color them, so I don't think she has to even put the contact lenses in. But her look here is different. It's better and worse, I think, at the same time. Now, there is clearly less prosthetics. When Rebecca Romaine was Mystique, they were all over her face. So the problem with that is that there's not really the continuity here, because especially in the first two films, Days of Future Past and the other First Class, they did have sort of a continuity where it looked like they were using the same kind of applications there. This doesn't look like it's even remotely the same. On the one hand, like I said, I like the continuity, but on the other hand, she looks much more attractive this way. In fact, I would go so far as to remove the scales on her forehead, because they look a little too pronounced. But if the idea is to try to make her look more attractive, that's fine. I've always said the biggest sin in movies is trying to take an attractive woman and make her look ugly. So I was never a fan really of the nearly nude Mystique. It was sort of like, I don't know if it was supposed to be like titillating or something, but the idea was that, she manifest clothes from her own skin and stuff. So that was the idea behind it. But particularly in this this SJW climate, yes, I couldn't get through a whole video without mentioning that. But of course they're going to put clothes on Mystique now. It's kind of hard to believe they got away with it for so long. But again, I don't know. It looks okay. Her makeup, she looks a lot more human, looks a lot more Jennifer Lawrence-ish. And you don't want to make an attractive woman unattractive in the movies. That's my old adage. All right, let's see. Just briefly, let's take a look at some of the other characters. We have Storm returning. She doesn't have the mohawk, thank God. I thought that mohawk was ridiculous. It was in the comics, so I understand using it, but yeah, we didn't need it. And Kurt doesn't get a close up in any of these pictures, though. Unfortunately, what's going on there? Okay, he just gets like background. Looks. I didn't get a. We did get a shot of Beast. I didn't save it here though, but I want to talk about Beast more than necessarily see him, because it looks like all along it seems like in these films, in these First Class, version of the X-Men, Beast is like the Professor's right hand man and sort of like his biggest critic. And here he's like smashing a glass. I don't know if this is supposed to be alcohol, because it looks like Hank has got a glass in front of him too, so maybe they were just drinking water or something. But he's smashing all the glasses off the table because he's like fed up with what Charles has done to Jean, which again, this is kind of like in shades of The Last Stand. I mean, Wolverine had the same routine, I can't believe you did this and this and that, and I don't know. I'm afraid it's going to be deja vu. They should have took it in space, which apparently they do take it in space to an extent. There's going to be some kind of space mission where things go awry, and this is where Jean's Phoenix powers are made manifest. Apparently, get that great shot at the end of the screen there, at the end of the trailer, where she's sort of being bombarded by Phoenix radiation, which I don't really understand how they're going to do that either, because She got her Phoenix powers at the end of Apocalypse. Now she's getting them from space, or is this just the Dark Phoenix is a different thing that is being made manifest here? I'm not sure. We will have to find out. And of course, we have Magneto back again. Magneto is Neato. And I love Michael Fassbender, and I love him as Magneto, but another one of my great fears is, are we going to drag him back into this movie again if he doesn't need to be there? I don't think Magneto was in the Dark Phoenix saga, if I remember correctly. I mean, the whole saga, either the Phoenix saga or the Dark Phoenix saga. I don't think he played a very big part. And I think that was a problem with Apocalypse. It was kind of like they want to replay the same beats from First Class and Days of Future Past with Magneto. But you can't do that for very long because while he's a frenemy, you can't really force him into a story where the main antagonist is Jean. So I'm kind of dubious of this. The problem really is that, again, is it going to look too much like The Last Stand? Is he going to try to win Jean over to his side, or is his a part in the story to be helping um Charles and everybody stop her? I think the latter would be better because we've already seen the former, but again, how much of that goes against Magneto's nature? Magneto, you don't want him to be completely altruistic. Again, he does bad things for the right reason. Now, if he's confronted with the Dark Phoenix, is he going to, see that as a mutation and he's all for it? Like in The Last Stand, would it go against his nature to not be all for it because it's a manifestation of mutant power? And apparently, from what I understand, people are saying that this is going to be Genosha, and that's another thing that's kind of concerning because in The Last Stand they did the Cure storyline, which I thought was pretty good. I don't dislike The Last Stand. I'll be the first to say it. In some ways, it was more comic book esque than any of the other films, than any other Singer films. Although I would say the Singer films are probably, well, with the exception of Apocalypse, X1, X2, and Days of Future Past are all, head and shoulders above the other films. But The Last Stand did feel very comic bookish. And I don't understand the hate, as I've said before, I don't understand the hate for the deaths in X3 The Last Stand because they are all undone. So either, you're complaining because you wanted them to stay dead, which who would want them all to stay dead, or you're complaining because, you know, you didn't want them killed in the first place, but if you didn't want them killed in the first place, it doesn't matter. They all come back. It's kind of confusing. So anyway, let's see. Yeah, Genosha, I don't know. I mean, that's a good storyline for Eric. Is it gonna dominate screen time? I don't know. Is it gonna take away from Dark Phoenix? I don't know. That's the concern. I could go through a lot more of these images here. I don't know how many more. Uh, let's see. I could do. This is a funeral apparently. The thing about the funeral is, it seems blatantly obvious it's Jean, but a lot of people are saying this is probably the beginning of the movie because that's the thing about the Phoenix. She comes back. The Phoenix, rises from the ashes, returns. I don't know. Maybe that's true. I was thinking that's probably the end of the movie, but I don't know. Will Jean die this time? That's a good question. Another thing I'm not too sure about is this is going to be the first time we're going to see Bald Charles, played by James McAvoy. And the feeling I get from this trailer is that he's too young to be Bald Charles. I don't know because I love James McAvoy's Professor Xavier. I was the one that said that he should have gotten a Best Actor Oscar for Days of Future Past. I think he's been perfect all along. I thought he was great in First Class. He was even great in Apocalypse, even though it wasn't that great of a film. But I don't know. I don't sense the commanding presence here that I did with Patrick Stewart playing the same part. Now, at this point, he should become Patrick Stewart. I think to an extent, Michael Fassbender, although he, doesn't have the gray hair, but I think he's reached the level of Ian McKellen. I think we saw that. I think he always was closer probably because Magneto didn't change very much. He didn't have a very big story arc. So I could see bits of the Ian McKellen Magneto even as far back as First Class. Although I would say definitely halfway through Days of Future Past, that's the Ian McKellen Magneto. As far as James McAvoy's Professor X is concerned, he was playing a different Professor X all along. Days of Future Past being the most jarring, where he's sort of like in depression and despair and drinking and long hair and this and that, and taking the cure and things like that. This is like he's going to have to step it up, I think. As good an actor as he is, I think he will. But the thing is from what I see in this trailer, it looks like he's still conflicted and struggling and stuff. He should sort of have a handle on what he's trying to do at this point as a mature Charles Xavier. That's just my reading on it. Again, I'm not saying anything against McAvoy. He's a fantastic actor. And let's see. Again, this is more sort of aftermath of the funeral. You get to see Kurt a little bit there. I don't know why they're sort of backtracking him and sidelining him a little bit in this trailer, but Storm doesn't get too much to do either here. It looks like in this trailer, but still, Storm is a difficult character to really do anything with to begin with. But I don't know. I've gone over that a couple of times, I think, in the past. Let's see. We've got, let's talk about Jessica Chastain for a minute here. We didn't get a whole lot of her in the trailer either. She meets Jean in a church, which is a nice moment because Jean is obviously having severe difficulties. And I don't know, she looks mysterious. She's supposedly an alien. She's not playing Lilandra. I don't know who she's playing, but she's apparently going to give she's probably going to get Jean under her sway. Now, something I'm not sure about, but I am going to guess is that she is the Phoenix, and she is a product of Jean's mind. And Jean is the only one that can see her and converse with her, and she is the Phoenix entity made manifest so that she can sort of converse with the Phoenix. And the Phoenix will take over her and not come to her anymore, but be overtaking her. That's my prediction. I could be right, I could be wrong. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But we didn't see anything to challenge that, I think. All right, here again, this is another scene that looks like it's pretty much right out of Last Stand. We've got the whole team there. Beast is there. Mystique is there, and Charles is there. Charles is the one not in costume. And they're confronting Jean, probably around her home. I don't know. And let's see. Apparently, things go very, very wrong. She uses her powers. I think it's a really nice moment when Magneto says, you didn't come to me. He says, I've seen evil before and I'm looking at it now. And it's sad. It's really sad. I think that's the thing about the Dark Phoenix saga that impresses me the most, and I think is what made it so popular. Because when I was a kid, I wasn't into the X-Men. I love this scene. I love the way this shot looks. I wasn't into the X-Men. I said this before many times, but X-Men is sort of like a teenager's thing. When you're a kid, you want to see Spider-Man swinging around and punching and Hulk, Fantastic Four. When you become a teenager and you realize there's some substance to the X-Men and it's all about, mistreatment and there's the social relevance to it. And then there's also the soap opera element. There isn't a whole lot of Spider-Man has some of it, some of that kind of thing. Most of the other stories don't have a large soap opera element. And the soap opera element is pretty strong in X-Men. I think it had a lot of female fans because of it. And part of it is what makes the Dark Phoenix saga so great is it's that soap opera core. It's a tragedy. It's the love between Cyclops and Jean Grey that is doomed to die. And he's doomed to kill her, basically. That's something they transposed over to Wolverine in The Last Stand. I think we're actually going to see the real the real story, which has Cyclops being the one tormented by the fate of Jean Grey. Now, my only lament is that they couldn't manage to do this with Wolverine in the film. Of course, they couldn't do it with Hugh Jackman Wolverine because this is a reboot, and that would have complicated matters. You'd have whatever, however old Wolverine is, and then we've got like teenage Jean Grey. Although she's not supposed to be that young, but apparently they still look very young, this cast. But I missed that. But the sad thing about the Dark Phoenix saga is that it's all about, and I think the cartoon really did this justice even more than the book, but it's about a team, a family that bands together to save and protect one of theirs who doesn't deserve it, who really, by all legality, should pay for their crimes. And that's why the edict was handed down by Jim Shooter, very famously handed down by Jim Shooter, that Jean had to die, that she couldn't destroy planets and still be a member of the X-Men and get to live happily ever after with Cyclops. And so they're really fighting on the wrong side here to try to protect her. Now, I don't know exactly who's going to be coming after her apart from the army, which let's get a look at that. But they're willing to go into opposition against people that have a point, people that are saying she's committed crimes, she's done wrong, she's a danger. We can't have her around doing this stuff. And the X-Men stop them and say, no, she's one of ours. She's our family. You're not going to take her away and you're not going to destroy her. We are going to deal with her and we're going to put her right. But can you? That's the question. And that's the drama of the whole story. And that's why I think the Dark Phoenix is always going to be an enduring story. Because whether you love the X-Men or not, this is just great drama. This is just a great story. And you have Professor X, of course, who's the mentor, and he feels like he's failed her. More drama, and again, this is great stuff. And they're not doing the Lilandra stuff, and there was a lot of stuff in the original story about that. But you can see they're clearly touching on the Professor X being responsible element. And let's see. Again, another great shot here of them in the costumes. And again, it looks like they're going to put Cyclops front and center in this. Beast looks great, like I said. This is an interesting scene where Charles is apparently trying to find Jean with Cerebro and is overcome by the Phoenix powers. Interesting. Very interesting. And that's about it, I think. Let's see. Let's take a look. We've got to take a look at the beautiful Sophie Turner. She's just lovely. And I think she's great as Jean Grey. This is exactly what I imagined of Jean Grey. Not to say that Famke Janssen was bad. She was also very good, but I don't know. I still like her better. I think I like Sophie Turner better, and she just looks like, she reminds me of is a young Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr, of course, one of the most beautiful actresses of all time, and she has that quality. She has a very pretty quality about her that makes her sort of ethereal, that matches in well with the Dark Phoenix or the Phoenix. When she's empowered like that, you can kind of see that light behind the eyes, and yeah, she's just stunning. And let's take a look at a final one here. Let's see. We spent a lot of time on this, and I've actually even have more images prepared, but we've been on here on for about an hour, so that's the way they end it. They got the Phoenix powers in her eyes, which is very, that's a nice, cool look. So, what do y'all think about the Dark Phoenix? Do you think this is going to be something that's really going to hit the spot for X-Men fans? Is it going to sort of take the better aspects of The Last Stand and elevate them? Again, I don't hate The Last Stand. I was one of the few that actually liked that movie a lot. Not a perfect movie. I didn't like the way Rogue took the cure. That was probably my biggest problem with that one. It's understandable in her place, but I think this film is going to be good. I think it's going to be very good. I said on Twitter that I'm probably 70% pleased with it, with this trailer. I think, like I said, there's a few little glaring niches where it looks like they could be trying to just do elements of The Last Stand but better. But I think they do have a pretty good framework here to do a captivating Dark Phoenix. And the thing is the Dark Phoenix, uh, it needs a broader palette. They did a 45-minute Dark Phoenix saga basically with The Last Stand. That was a short film, really. If they stretch this one to Apocalypse or Days of Future Past length, I think this will be something. This will truly be something that you are going to call one of the greatest comic book films of all time. It has that potential. So let me know what you think in the comments below, yay or nay on the Dark Phoenix. Okay, and our final story of the day, our final story, we have, yes, this terror, this terror before us. Kathleen Kennedy has got an extension on her contract, a 3-year extension, where she will continue to be the chairman emeritus. Is that what they call them? I don't know. But she's going to be in charge of the Star Wars fraction at Disney. Again, I just have a small clip here of notes. I don't think this is particularly anything that I can't tell you off the top of my head, but the notes I have, it says, the box office disappointment of Solo, a Star Wars story, notwithstanding, Kathleen Kennedy has been renewed. Her contract has been renewed to remain president of Lucasfilm for another 3 years through 2021. According to The Hollywood Reporter, the studio plans to expand the universe with new characters introduced in movies and television shows. According to Bob Iger, the president, I don't know, I lost the rest of that there. But he was the one saying that they are going to slow down Star Wars. Slow down, take it easy. And again, why? Why? Or as Luke would say, no! So, on the heels of The Last Jedi being the most divisive Star Wars movie in the history of divisive Star Wars movies, and on the heels of Solo being the first Star Wars movie to, if you don't want to say outright bomb, say underperformed. I liked Solo, a Star Wars story. I never made no bones about that. I am not going to try to, you know, change my opinion on things. I'm going to make it real with you all every single time. I liked it. It wasn't something that rocked my world. It wasn't something that blew me away. It was just a serviceable film that more or less touched on the touchstones of the Han Solo backstory that I always wanted to see. How he got the Falcon, how he met Lando, how he met Chewie. It was fine. It was fine. It wasn't a mind blower. None of these movies from Disney are though yet. I mean, Rogue One was pretty good. Although on the rewatch with Rogue One, as much as I still like that movie, it's kind of like superfluous. I mean, it doesn't really do anything other than tell you a niche side story in the saga, you know? And so when I'm watching all the Star Wars movies together and I kind of come to that one, I'm like, I could probably pass this, but I don't. Or at least, the last couple times I've watched, I've only, you know, done a marathon of the Star Wars movies like 2 or 3 times since the movie came out. But it's a good movie, but I mean, it's again kind of superfluous. And the same can be said of Solo. I mean, it's good, but it's superfluous. So, on the heels of all that, we have Kathleen Kennedy returning to further plague Star Wars, to further be a blight on the Star Wars brand, and to further torment Star Wars fans who are hoping for better with the Star Wars universe. Again, I don't know what can be said. This is just sad. A lot of people, I think, starting with Grace Randolph. Grace, you've got a lot to answer to. I say that playfully. I don't think anybody really knew what was going to happen, but Grace Randolph apparently broke the report saying a couple of months ago that come September, Kathleen Kennedy's out of there. They're not going to just keep throwing her into the role of, president and stuff and be making these disastrous choices. I personally go back so far as The Force Awakens and say I was underwhelmed. I was not a big fan of The Force Awakens. Now, The Force Awakens is not a horrible movie by any stretch. I think they set the groundwork there pretty good, but it's still any Star Wars sequel trilogy that doesn't reunite Han, Leia, Luke, and probably even Lando. I mean, you could have saved him for the sequel, but you only had Han Solo for one movie, so you put Lando in. The problem is they weren't making the sequel trilogy to appeal to, the original trilogy fans. What they were trying to do is they were trying to do their own, again, SJW propaganda. We're going to make it woke with the casting, which, again, this is not something that I complain about like with Birds of Prey, where you have an established character who's blonde and blue-eyed, and then you take a minority character and fill the role. In this case, you could very clearly have a black lead. You could very clearly have a female lead. You can very clearly have, all these new characters be multi races. And I not only would be okay with that, but I expected it. And what they did though was they put them front and center and basically threw Harrison Ford in as a sop to the fans and say, "Hey, look, this is for you because you love Han Solo, don't you? You love Harrison Ford." But they didn't build a story around any of that. They should have built a story around the original trilogy characters first, Han, Luke, and Leia, and Lando and Chewie and the droids. Build a story around that. Have the emergence of the next generation, which would be Rey and Finn and Poe. Have them emerge in the film and not make it feel like they were front and center, that the story was about them. It really shouldn't be about them. It should still be about the original characters that we introduced them in the first movie. Then The Last Jedi comes, and from there you can, you know, something that Lucas did very well. He just introduced Mace Windu in The Phantom Menace. He had a larger part in Attack of the Clones and an important part in Revenge of the Sith. It's important to introduce your characters well and then build on that introduction. That's the problem that they had with the sequel trilogy. They just thrust Rey as almost a completely formed Jedi into the film. No explanations, no understanding. They gave Finn a whole lot of screen time where he should have been introduced, and then they could build on him in the next movie. He could be the turncoat stormtrooper in the first movie, and then he becomes a great rebellion leader. Maybe modeling himself after Han Solo or something. It would be fun to see them interact more. But we just got sort of the most, superfluous, incidental interaction between them, Han and Finn. So anyway, this is very disappointing if you're a Star Wars fan. We're going to be subjected to 3 more years of Kathleen Kennedy in charge. Now, there's been more speculation that the reason why Kennedy is still ensconced in her position is that nobody else would take the job. Uh, J.J. Abrams flat out refused the job, which, again, I'm not the biggest fan of J.J. Abrams, but he can make an entertaining movie. But I don't know if I would make him the brainstorm, the mastermind behind these films. It's up to him to try to salvage Episode 9. We're gonna have to see how that goes. And the motivating factor they're saying is that the old guard that Kennedy brought in and ensconced in power were going to rebel against whoever they pick to succeed her, which I don't understand that. Because if you're going to get rid of the problem, you get rid of the root, and you get rid of the dry rot, and you get rid of everything else around it. So if Kennedy had hangers on there, fire all them right now. Fire their bleeps like no tomorrow. Fire their bleeps like it's going out of style. You know what I'm saying? You don't bleep around. I'm using a lot of bleeps here, but I'm getting pretty energized about this. I don't know why they felt that this was a good idea, especially when you consider just what of an abject failure she's been in this position. I mean, this is no joke. This is Star Wars. Remember, this is Star Wars. This is the biggest franchise of all. The franchise among franchise. Or franchises. Is that plural? I think it's franchisee. No. But the fact is that Star Wars was immune to failure. You put out a Star Wars movie, it is going to be $1 billion blockbuster. And even with The Last Jedi being divisive, it still made $1 billion. Imagine how more it would have made if it was good. And that's the question that they have to ask themselves. Apparently, Kennedy is going to back off. Supposedly that Episode 9 is sort of already in the works, and it's not going to change. No matter what. But you got to remember, Kennedy's the one that's very hands-on. She's making the decisions. She's basically the Avi Arad of the Star Wars Lucasfilm. Because if you remember correctly, Avi Arad is the one that pulled all the strings in the Spider-Man movies, the Sony Spider-Man movies that made most of them a disaster. Post Spider-Man 3, at least. Spider-Man 3, he insisted that Venom be involved, which, to be honest, I don't think was I still like Spider-Man 3. I don't care what anybody says. I like Spider-Man 3. Not a perfect movie, but still, Spider-Man 3 was a good movie. Anyway, again, I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Kathleen Kennedy still here to plague us. What's going to happen? Are we ever going to be rid of her? Are we ever going to have good Star Wars movies again? I couldn't resist. I had to make the meme. But even Captain Kirk is very discouraged by this. Even Captain Kirk is distraught by this news. And like I said, get rid of the whole regime. Cut them loose. Cut them loose and let them fall in the sea. Drop anchor and cut the anchor loose. There's no way, no how that we're going to get any improvement under Kathleen Kennedy. I mean, she's been a disaster every step of the way. Her only concern for The Force Awakens was that it was practical effects. Then there was director changes on Rogue One. There was director changes on Solo, a Star Wars story. Solo was the biggest financial failure for a Star Wars film. The Last Jedi was divisive as all get out because she handpicked Rian Johnson and backed every one of his decisions that were disastrous, to say the least. And we're going to reward this person by putting her back in charge of Star Wars for another 3 years? Do they want Star Wars to fail? Do they want Star Wars to go under? Do they want fans to rebel to the point where it's going to be abject failure for the franchise? I get a feel for George Lucas, Because like I said, he made his decision. But to see in your own lifetime your handiwork get burned to the ground like this, I don't know. Supposedly they're taking tips and pointers from him for episode 9. I don't know if I would even bother if I was him. But like I said, would he want to continue to see his franchise burn to the ground like this? Maybe it's worth it to him to go in there, try to prop it up. Try to prop it up because the legs are cut out. The legs are cut out. Star Wars is an amputee now, a double amputee. It's got no legs under it anymore, just like Captain Kirk in this picture. It's got no leg to stand on. And if he can, George Lucas maybe prop it up a little bit, and they could salvage with the help of J.J. Abrams episode 9, maybe I'll reconsider thinking that, you know, Kennedy is the kiss of death to this franchise. But as it stands now, I don't think so. I think Star Wars is going to continue to go down. It's going down for the third time even as we speak because it already went down once, twice. How many more times can fans throw it a lifesaver, a life preserver, or a cherry lifesaver? I don't know, whichever one's better. I like the cherry ones. Pineapple's good too. I really like the pineapple. All right, so there you have it for another show. Let me know what you think in the comments below. We are done for another night's Torch News Roundup, and thank you for joining me. And let me know what you think in the comments below about any of the stories we talked about, the trailers we discussed, topics we discussed. What do you think about the future of Star Wars? Is it in jeopardy, baby? And I will be with you again. Let me see. I'm going to try to work on those Halloween videos that I tell you every October that I'm going to do. Last year, I only got to 2. The year before that, I got to 4. I can't promise how many I'm going to be able to get to this year, but I am going to make an effort to get you some Halloween reviews up of classic horror movies. And, of course, the next Torch News Roundup should be next Wednesday. I'm still in the middle of the Iron Fist Season 2, which, I don't know, it's kind of it's all over the place. I felt a more cohesive storyline out of Luke Cage season 2, but I still enjoy Iron Fist season 2 maybe more because I like the characters more. I mean, like Mariah is so unpleasant. It was not really always a pleasant experience. But with the case of like Davos, I love that character. He's great. And Ward and Joy and stuff, they got a good supporting cast that's a lot more entertaining to watch, I think. But we'll have to see how the whole storyline plays out at the end of it all. Okay, so until next we meet, this is Johnny Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.